Okay, so we're going to move on now to the value graph. So in the same After Effects project, if you remember, you've got two compositions here. So we're going to move on to the Stones 2 composition. So if you double click on that, and you'll see if you look down here in the layer panel, you've got both compositions open now inside the one project. Okay. We're going to focus on the water layer initially because it's the middle one. So I'm going to drag that up to the top. We're going to be modifying the scale value. So if we press S to show the scale property or value. Okay, so initially we're going to keyframe it to 0%. So we click on the timer, take it to 1 frame, and initially on this first keyframe, reduce that to 0% scale. Then move the playhead to 1 frame, and we'll put it back up to 100. So we've done loads of these now, very simple scale animation. Okay, so we're going to look at the graph editor now for scale. So if we turn that on, so I'm just going to move the layer forward a bit so we have so we can see the first keyframe clearly. Turn on the graph editor, click on the scale property, and you can see we've got a kind of graph that looks quite different to the previous position graph. Okay, so if you remember, if we click on the the menu icon here, the auto select icon, you can see it's on auto select. So this is the kind of graph you will see for the scale value. If I click on value graph here, you see there's no change, so that's the value that we're seeing. Okay, so if we just reduce the work area down, so I'm going to put the playhead at 2 frames. If you press N, that will reduce the work area down to that area. Okay, now if we look at the graph here, we've got from 0 to 100%, which is the scale, and then obviously we've got the over time, so it's showing us the duration of that scale. So I've just tested it initially. You see it's a very straightforward uniform scale. So first of all, I'm just going to select these 2 keyframes. So you can either shift click on the 2 keyframes, or you can drag a selection box around them. And then if you go down to the easy ease setting here, and you'll see that just slowly eases in and eases out the scale. So if we test that, you can see that's altered slightly. It's a bit smoother. And then you see if we want to change the duration of the scale, we can move one of the keyframes in. So if we want to shorten the scale, we can bring this in. We could bring this in too. So if we have a look at that now, you'll see it's a much reduced duration. Okay, if I want to change the percentage of the scale, the value of the scale, I can click on this top keyframe here, I can drag this down, and you can see this is reducing this down to about 50%. Okay, and again the view snaps to, so we can see the whole graph. It immediately automatically zooms in. So if I test that now, you can see it's only scaling up to 50%. Okay, I'm going to take that back to 100%, so that second keyframe, I can just adjust that value. So it's important as well to move the playhead to the point where you're changing the value. So if I click on change to 100. Okay, if I didn't move the playhead to that keyframe, so if I move the playhead somewhere else and change the value by changing the number here, you see it adds a second keyframe. Okay, so it's important to remember that about moving the playhead. Okay, so if we just adjust the keyframes back to approximately where they were, and then what can be really useful, if you just press spacebar, so it continues playing in this work area on a loop, and then you can actually adjust the graph in real time, so you can see the results immediately. So what I was going to have a go at doing was now adjusting the handles. So if I just adjust this handle up, you see that the corresponding animation here, it scales up, okay, above 100% and then back down to 100%. So you get this little kind of bump animation at the end as it bumps into place, which can be quite nice. So again, that's really useful, just being able to adjust in real time here. So I can adjust the other handle. So it initially scales quite slowly and then speeds up towards the end. Okay, one other interesting effect here, if I just adjust this lower handle here and take the graph down so it goes below 0 into the negative, what this does is it basically flips the logo. So you can see here, if I just zoom in, you can see it's actually flipped it while it's in negative, and then when we get back to 0, so it's still scaling it up here, but it's flipped. Okay, and then as I bring the needle back to 0, we go to this point, it goes to almost disappears, and then back up, it starts scaling back up again, but it's flipped around again 180 degrees to its proper orientation. Okay, so there's one more thing I want to show you to do with adjusting the anchor point again. So if we try a different symbol here, so I'm just going to focus on the poison symbol. I'll drag this up to underneath the water symbol. So again, if I show the scale property for this, okay, I'm going to turn the graph off for a minute. I'm going to put in a couple of keyframes. So we'll go from 0, turn on the scale, go from 0, go to 1 frame and up to 100. Okay, so we've created our basic scale. Okay, and you'll see at the moment that the scale is happening uniformly around the anchor point in the center here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this. I'm just going to delete this first keyframe here, and then selecting the second keyframe, I'm going to turn on the anchor point selection tool. I'm going to move this. If you hold down Control, it will use a kind of smart guide to snap it into position. So I'm going to drag it into the center of the water symbol here. Okay. And then if I now create a keyframe at start here, you'll see that it's scaling out from that central anchor point. Okay, so it's emerging from the center there. Okay, so finally we can show the graph for that particular scale, and we could apply, so at the moment it's a linear scale like that, so we could apply easy ease to it. So again, if we select the 2 keyframes here and easy ease, and then we get a more gradual ease out and ease in. So if we just test that, okay. So you can see with this second scale I've done, it's kind of effectively also changing the position. It's scaling out from this central point here, so it's good if you want a very kind of uniform, controlled sort of movement, particularly out from a point, from the anchor point. Okay. Okay, so that is the scale value graph. Okay, so we're going to stick with the value graph, but this time the rotation value. So just give you a little preview of what you're going to produce. So we're going to create this spinning roulette wheel. Okay, so that's what we're going to aim to produce by again modifying the value graph. Okay, so firstly, if you can create a new project and call it After Effects Spinning Wheel, and then we're going to import the assets in as we normally do. You'll have downloaded the assets from Teams. So again, right click in the project window, import file, navigate to the assets folder. Now it's the wheel asset that we're bringing in. We're setting import as to composition retain layers and making sure create composition is ticked, and that will import everything we need in. Double click on the composition and then you'll see the layers will appear here. We're going to just rename these layers because they've not been named. So the top one is spinner. Okay, and then the next one is numbers. So just to right click and rename. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with the numbers layer. If you press R to select, activate the rotation property, we're going to insert a keyframe at 0. We've got 0 rotations, move to 3 frames, and we're going to set the rotation to 6. So this first 0 here is the number of rotations, the second number is the number of degrees. Okay, so each rotation is 360 degrees. We could, if we wanted, set you know, if we wanted 6 full 360 degree rotations plus a, you know, a part rotation, then we can set this degree value here. Okay, so if we just test that, so if we press spacebar, and we've created a straightforward 6 rotations over 3 frames. If we turn motion blur on here, okay, this will give us a nice kind of dynamic effect to the movement. Might just take a minute to render it. Let me just test that. So you can see it gives us this nice motion blur effect. Okay, we'll just play that through again. So there we go. Okay, and then if we just shift click to select both keyframes, now a shortcut for easy ease is F9, so if you press F9 that will convert those 2 keyframes to an ease out on the first one and an ease in on the second one. If we open the graph editor, make sure rotation property is selected, fill the graph editor, and that gives us a visual representation of that ease in and ease out and ease in. So ease out from the first keyframe, slowly speeding up, and then an ease into the second keyframe. So there we go. Okay. Okay, and then as we've done previously, we can manipulate this graph. We can select individual keyframes, use the handles to change the curve. And you'll see that if I mouse over here, this tells us how many degrees have been rotated at any particular point. And you'll see here, if I manipulate the graph so it dips back down again, effectively this is where the number of rotations peaks, and then actually the number of rotations is reduced back down here. So if I play that through, we've got it rotating in a clockwise direction, and then for this final bit, as the number of rotations reduce, it actually starts to rotate in an anti-clockwise direction, reducing the number of rotations. Or should I say, reducing the number of rotations in a clockwise direction. So the final few rotations are anti-clockwise, reducing the number of rotations in a clockwise direction, if that makes sense. Okay, so just to demonstrate this idea of clockwise and anti-clockwise as well, so if I put a kind of ordinary ease in, ease out graph here, you can see that it's rotating in a clockwise direction all the way through. Okay, but if we just drag this keyframe down below 0, okay, let me just do a kind of inverse of what I've just done, and then you'll see that this, because it's in the minus direction, which is anti-clockwise, it's now rotating in an anti-clockwise direction very slowly. I'm just going to drag that down. Okay, just doing it quite slowly so you can clearly see. So there, because it's in the minus direction, it's going in an anti-clockwise direction. Okay. Okay, now we're going to just have a look at the spinner itself, the actual central bit. Now if we zoom in, if you hold down Control and with the mouse and then spacebar, if you hold down spacebar you can move the actual view around, and you'll see at the moment that this anchor point is slightly off center. Okay, so we want to adjust that. Let me just move the layers back up a bit. Okay, just so we can see a bit more clearly what we're doing, if we click on the spinner layer here, and we're going to select T for transparency or opacity, and we're just going to reduce the opacity down a bit so we can see what the center point is underneath. So you can see the anchor point is off center here. Okay, if I select the anchor point tool, if you remember the shortcut for that was Y. Okay, and then we can select the anchor point and we can just shift it down here and center it. Okay, if we zoom back out, so Control and mouse wheel out. If you want to fit it in the window, if you go to the drop down here, the drop down here on the left and just fit. Okay, so we're going to select the rotation property for the spinner layer, and shift click T again, so we've got the opacity as well, and we're also going to shift click and select A for the anchor point property as well. What this enables us to do, if I just change these anchor point properties here, you see it actually moves the layer rather than the anchor point itself. Okay, so that's another way of adjusting that so it's in line with the anchor point. There we go. Okay, so we're going to change the rotation property. So if we just click on the spinner layer and press R, so we've just got rotation showing now. So make sure we're on the right layer. So on the spinner layer, press R. So we've got the rotation property for the spinner. Turn the graph view off, so we're back to the layer view. Okay, if we move the needle a bit further along, now if you remember we've got this final keyframe on the numbers layer here, I'm just going to move the needle a bit, the playhead should I say, beyond that to fourth frame. Okay, I'm going to set the rotation to -6 here, so again that's in an anti-clockwise direction, so the spinner's going to be going in the opposite direction. Just make sure to turn the rotation on to insert a keyframe there, so that's -6 rotations on that keyframe. Move the playhead back to 0. Okay, and again if we insert 0 rotations here, and that will again insert a keyframe, so we're going from 0 to -6, and you can see that that spinner is rotating in an anti-clockwise direction, the opposite direction to the numbers. Oh sorry, no, I've still left the numbers on anti-clockwise as well, so we need to turn those back to a clockwise direction. So again I can adjust the keyframes for the numbers back. So if I click on this second keyframe here, click on the number of rotations there, change that to 6, so that's +6. Sorry, make sure I'm in the right place here. Move the playhead to this keyframe here, change that to 6. Okay, and then you'll see that we've got them rotating in opposite directions, the spinner anti-clockwise, the numbers clockwise. Again we can turn motion blur on. Okay, there we go. Oh, turn opacity up as well for the spinner. So select the spinner T, opacity back up to 100. And there we go. Okay, and we can open the graph editor for the spinner as well. So if we turn that on, okay, just make sure here that we have the auto select selected. We click on the property, so it's not opacity we want, it's rotation. So I select the spinner layer, press R for rotation, select that property, and then we will see the graph for that particular property. If we turn easy ease on, so again we can click on the rotation property again, that will select those two keyframes either end of the graph. Turn easy ease on here, and then that will just smooth in that movement a bit. It slows, speeds up and slows. Let's have a look at that. Okay, moving in an anti-clockwise direction. So just to demonstrate, so if I move this handle up so the graph is actually going up above 0, okay, you'll see it, oh, hang on, you see it's resizing there, so we can see that it's just going up above 0 here. I'm going to make that a bit more of a steep curve. Okay, and what effectively that will do is, so it will reverse the direction. So it starts off by spinning in a clockwise direction now because it's above 0, and then reverses back to anti-clockwise as it goes below 0. Okay, so that kind of clearly demonstrates that. Some of this movement's extremely quick and it's difficult to see, so if you want to actually see it more clearly, if you use page down, If you move the playhead to 0 and press page down, you'll see what I'm talking about. So if I'm pressing page down here, frame by frame, it's moving, the spinner is moving in a clockwise direction to the top of the peak of the curve here, and then as the curve starts to drop down, you'll see that it reverses direction and starts to go in an anti-clockwise direction. Okay, so that hopefully demonstrates that. Now if we decide we want, when it stops spinning, we want the spinner to land on a particular number, so the highest value here, what we can do is we can click on that final keyframe, move the playhead to that final keyframe, and then we can rotate, using the properties here, we can rotate the spinner till it's aligned with that highest value there. Okay, and then it will finish up on there. It's just rendering a little bit slowly, this machine at the moment, so it's taking longer than it should do to play through, but you see it ends up on the highest value there, which is the 2000. Okay, so have an experiment with that. I think again playing it in real time and adjusting the graph in real time gives you a sense of how your adjustments are affecting what's happening on the stage here. Okay.